Again, this is the Kitsap Sun editorial board talking about the Bainbridge Island Central Ward City Council candidates. Doesn't really make a difference to me who goes first, so we'll go alphabetically and let Joe begin.
All right. Is the camera on?
It is.
Okay.
Well,
Didn't want to have to repeat this.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank all those in cyberspace who will be watching this later. In terms of who I am, I'm Joe Levan, and I'm running for the Central Ward for the Bainbridge Island City Council. And I guess the initial question would be why I'm running. The main reason I'm running is because I love Bainbridge. I think it's a beautiful place, a very unique and special place. And I feel like as nice as it is, our city council and our city government can do better. And I feel like I've got a unique blend of skills and experience that I can really help the city do better. And I want to be a part of that process, not just for today, but for the future. In terms of who I am and why, what skills I bring to the table, I've lived on the island for 16 years. I was married for 17 years, and my wife is a business owner on the island, so I have a unique sense too about kind of the challenges that are faced by business owners on the island. I've got a 7-year-old daughter who has never lived anyplace else, so we're very, very invested in the community and love it there, and look to be there for a very long time. We had heard it was a beautiful place, and we found that to be true, and are very committed to staying there for the long term. In terms of what I bring to the table, what I do every day is I work for an organization in Seattle, which is my day job, which I will keep as a city council member, where I answer questions from cities throughout the state about legal questions, and I help them solve their problems. And I've been doing that at this place for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I was a city attorney, and I worked for law firms in private practice, working with cities and other local governments. So I have a lot of experience and applicable knowledge related to this position, and not just about legal issues, because the reason I went to law school is not to litigate. I went to law school primarily to help solve problems, and I found that to be an area. What I'm doing now, it's that passion for solving problems, but knowing the law is very important. And I think I can bring a lot of good information and experience and knowledge to the council. And also, I work a lot with best practices. I work with cities and other local governments throughout the state that have faced the same issues that Bainbridge faces. In fact, there's probably hardly any issue that I would face on the Bainbridge City Council that I haven't dealt with in one way or another in my past experience. And so what I do is I work with them not just on trying to help them answer the immediate question, but think about the longer term and think about best practices. And for example, if a city is doing something, whether it be Bremerton or Bellingham or whatever, Bellevue, whatever it may be, I help them pull together best practice and figure out what works in other places so that they can learn from the experience of others. So there's a lot I can bring to the table from that front. And I just think that our city council is doing a pretty good job, but we can definitely do better. Thank you.
David.
Hey, I'm David Ward, also a candidate from the Central District on Bainbridge. I've lived on the island for the last 21 years. I met my wife there. Our daughter and granddaughters live quite near us, and so it's nice to have our family around and see them every day. I've got advanced degrees in both plant ecology and business administration, so I'm a scientist with a business background or a businessman with a scientific background, depending on what the situation is. I've got 30 years of business experience. 25 of that has been in the mapping industry and the remote sensing industry. In the time I've lived on Bainbridge, I've gotten involved that whole time in various citizen participation committees, including the Port Blakely Development Committee, the Housing Resources Board, fairly recently the Forestry Commission on the city. I'm actively involved in the University of Washington Precision Forestry Council, where we look at ways of using technology not only for forestry but for various types of urban mapping. I've worked with Bainbridge Island Rowing Club not only as a participant but helping them secure the facility in Waterfront Park, and that was my first real experience on negotiating with the city, which was an eye-opener. I'm currently chairman and have been for the last 2 years of our neighborhood council on Cave Avenue, and then I'm entering my 3rd year on the city's utility advisory committee, and I just finished up a year as chairman. So why am I running? The neighborhood council experience gave me a real awakening in terms of what is going on with our planning and development department and how it can be better. There's a real disrespect for neighborhoods that needs to be solved. And the Utility Advisory Committee has given me real deep, and I think they're something that needs to be dealt with and needs to be solved, and they're eminently solvable. What I hope to accomplish with the city is to try to work with other council people and turn it into a much more efficient, responsive organization. Right now, we need to build real reserves in the city, not just selling off excess assets. And so we don't have to we don't have to look to borrowing money every time we need to do a major project like the sewer at Rockaway Beach. And I think we can do this by doing a top-to-bottom review of all the city activities, finding out what we do best internally and what we can do best through contract. Look at the required functions in each department and segregate those from the want to or the additional functions, and then work towards coming up with a much more efficient organization that focuses on the have to functions and maybe some more want to functions.
I'm going to ask the first question on something that you both touched on. Joe's got a connection with the business community, and you have a personal experience with that. It's something I haven't heard at many of the forums. I don't think we talked about it last time you guys were in here. But tell me an issue you are hearing from the business community. What's a way that the city could do a better job of fostering a community? Start with David.
Yeah, I'll give you one example, and it kind of goes to my interest in the planning department. I was talking to two people that own the Pavilion building where the theaters are in Madison, and they were going on and on with a story about how challenging it was to get a simple approval to do a remodel for one of their interior tenants, and they lost 2-3 months worth of rent because the planning department was so challenging to deal with. And that, we should be able to get to a decision there a lot quicker, because there's a real measurable impact on a businessman when they can't get a decision, can't get a space remodel, and can't get their tenant in there. And I see that as a very solvable problem, and it's one of several that can be dealt with that have a business impact.
Well, I think there's the bigger issue is this issue of partnership. I feel like there's a lot of people in the community, including the business community, that don't feel like the city's in a partnership with them. So when they come in and seek a permit or seek information, oftentimes they feel like they're kind of working at cross purposes. So in terms of specifics, there's all kinds of specifics. One example is the new Winslow Way project, which for the most part made it a much more attractive roadway, but I'm hearing concerns about trucks that used to be able to offload their goods, and they don't have a space to turn the trucks around on the street, at least on the intersections. And so that's part of the issue. If we're going to do projects in the city, which we're going to do, we need to listen very well to our community, not just to the residents, but also the businesses, and make sure we're doing things that make sense. And permitting is part of it as well. There are times when, in terms of our regulations, where apparently business people are told different things about different requirements, and it makes it very confusing for them. And it shouldn't happen. Those are the kinds of things that are very fixable. And in terms of doing things that make sense, our island, the way it's set up with our business parks and otherwise, I just think there's a lot more potential that we can utilize there. For example, our Day Road Industrial Park, I think there's just much more we can do, and that has to do with sitting down, talking to business owners, figuring out what they think about the situation, what they think could make it better, and then moving forward with that as best we can. And an example would be broadband access throughout the island. I think that's something that we should bring to the island, because there's a lot of people that work from home, a lot of other businesses that need that, and it's a way that we can really foster additional economic activity on the island and diversify our tax base.
The people backing the support of Bainbridge say that's part of what the port would do, economic development. So I guess I'm curious, do you think they need to have a port to do that, or is it something the city council can be doing themselves?
Well, I think it's an interesting issue. I'm still talking to people that are involved in that with the port proposal. And there is a forum coming up which I'll likely attend. So the issue is, I think there's a lot of people on the island that wouldn't be too keen about being taxed an additional amount of money in any event. So this would be an additional amount of money that people have to pay out of their pocket. I think people would be willing to do that if they felt like they were going to get a good bang for their buck. So that's part of the challenge with the Port District itself, is to make the case. And I've heard things that, I mean, definitely I know in my experience working as a city attorney and otherwise, and with other local governments, and with ports, that ports can do a lot of things that other local governments can't do. They can do some things that no other local governments can do. So they do in terms of economic development. But is this the right time? I don't know. And the good thing about it, of course, is that the voters of our island will vote on it. They'll make the decision. And so, you know, in terms of that democratic process, I think it's really, for myself, I haven't made a final decision on how I'm going to vote on it. I'm still collecting information, which I assume most people on the island are doing right now.
Do you think the city's been able to handle, or I shouldn't say been able to handle, has prioritized properly as far as the needs down on the waterfront?
No, I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, and that's part of the argument as well. What's taken it so long? Why hasn't the city moved quicker? And so maybe there are things. I mean, if you had a port district, for example, we have a Parks and Recreation district, and that became its own taxing authority to specialize, to focus on parks. And from what I can see, they've done a good job. They've really upped the ante in terms of making our parks better than they were before. If the port could do something that the city couldn't do through additional tax funding and plus expertise that the city doesn't have, and the people of the island want to vote to have that happen, I think, you know, there's a lot of potential there. And it's certainly, we live on an island, and there's an incredible resource there in terms of recreation and business opportunities. There's a lot more we can do, and so I'm definitely open to hearing more about what the port thinks, how they're going to specifically make that happen.
Well, I too am a voter on the port. My concern about the port at this point is we're going to elect port commissioners from a large pool of people. I know some of them are very capable individuals. And then we're going to approve a port in the same ballot, or disapprove a port in the same ballot. I would much rather see us elect some commissioners, or elect a board that could become commissioners, have that group develop a business plan with financial projections, and then we vote on it. So we know what we're getting. Right now there's an unknown in terms of who the commissioners are going to be, what sort of plan will get executed, and whether or not the port will be successful. Well, the people running the port and the plan are huge components to making that a success or a failure. And there's probably as many ports that are not a particularly contributing economic force in the community as there are ones that are. And that's all very much dependent on the people involved and the plan that they develop. So I think we've rushed this a bit. You know, if we did it in a three-step process, then people could understand what's going on, what their potential benefit would be, and make a much more informed decision about whether or not a port is a good thing or not.
If a port's not created, do you feel that the city needs to put more energy into answering some of those questions along the waterfront that these proponents have brought up?
Well, you know, I've been eminently involved in with Bainbridge Island Rowing on, you know, working on some of the waterfront issues. I personally helped, as I mentioned, develop the lease with the city on getting our facility down in a disused tennis court. And, you know, there really needs to be a much better dock down there for both for visiting boaters and for recreational uses. There's great potential for improvement there, and I'd like to see some of the $2 million that came from the Washington State Ferries go into the waterfront improvements, and I think the Park District is certainly capable of executing that.
Do you feel that $2 million should be spent down there? I realize the city isn't
down there, it should be
the,
spent on the waterfront is what I'm saying. And I think Waterfront Park is probably the most visible presence the city has on the waterfront, and it gets a tremendous amount of use just because it's so adjacent to downtown. I think that would be an excellent place to spend it, as long as it was spent wisely.
Joe, what's your opinion on when the time comes to be able to spend that money? Do you feel it's important to keep it in that waterfront area, or should it go around the island at different projects?
Well, if I understand it right, the way the money initially was going to be restricted from the state, we were only going to allow it if it had to be used for a certain purpose, and the way the city negotiated that, they they got rid of that restriction. And I think the idea there, which makes sense, is that let's use it let's use it based on the priorities that we have and fit it into that set of priorities. So I think that that's part of what the city is doing now, is going through an extensive strategic planning process to figure out how best to spend its money. And so should all of it go to pay for waterfront activities? I mean, probably not. I agree with Dave that there's a lot that can be done. I mean, I think the waterfront park is a great example. It's antiquated. It's functional, but we could do so much better. But it's a matter of, I know that, like, for example, when we built a restroom down there, 2 years of argument about what the restroom is going to look like and how much it's going to cost. And so all these things, there's bigger issues than just the specific, let's redo the stage of the waterfront park. It's how it fits into the bigger picture. So I think it was a good thing the city negotiated to have that money be used for whatever general purposes make sense. But we need to that's one of my job one as a city council member, is to make sure that strategic planning process moves forward very quickly, and we are very specific about what our high priorities are and figure out a way to fund those based on existing tax dollars and the existing budget.
When you talk about your ward in particular, what do you put at the top of the priorities list? What are your neighbors most concerned about if you're elected?
I would say the water system, and that was one of the things that I'm extremely familiar with and very passionate about solving. Right now we've got very, very high water rates. The city made a last-minute effort to lower the rates, and they're claiming that they're going to come up with a scenario that will enable them to offer rates that are the same as the KPUD and costs that are competitive, and I know that's not the case. I reviewed the numbers they have so far, which are preliminary, of course, but if you do the simple arithmetic on that, their costs exceed what their rates would be.
You think the city's better off if KPUD handles the water utility?
I do indeed. I
What
think
about
there's
the-
some
what about the-
very compelling reasons there, both from a business standpoint, economies of scale, but from a resource management standpoint. I think, if you look at the map of the county and just of the island, that water system covers a relative postage stamp, and yet the aquifers involved in, that are our long-term water sources in Island are pretty important to us, and it makes much more sense to manage that as an island-wide or a county-wide facility when you can take good care of that resource for the long term. I want my granddaughters to have a reliable source of water versus managing it as we're doing now as the postage stamp of that one water system.
Both questions, actually. Most important thing in your ward, as well as best way to handle that water.
Yeah, and in terms of what's most important in the ward, I think that the utility rates, especially the water rates and also the sewer rates, are a concern. They have been way too high. The city has taken direct action to lower their rates by 34% so far. So that's a big concern of people within the ward to deal with that situation. There's progress is being made. There's more that can be done on that as well. Also, because where we are, we're close to the ferry, we're close to the downtown core. There's a lot that can be done in terms of safety of our roadways and sidewalks, and because like where I live, I can walk. I'm fortunate because I live in a place where I can walk and bike into town and have bike lanes and nice sidewalks. But there's a lot of people, even within the central ward, that's not even an option because the roads are not well done. And part of it has to do with there's just projects that have been put on hold for many years, like Wing Point Way is a good example.
And you're talking about projects just like painting the bike lanes or installing sidewalks?
No, like, for example, I was talking about Ferncliff, where the roadway was built many years ago with nice bike lanes and sidewalks. So part of that had to do with new development that came onto the island, and the development led to improvements. But that's part of the concern too, I think, for people in Central Ward. That's where most of the development is. And so how do we manage that development? And I think it's a good thing. Like, for example, I live close to where there's it's called the Housing Resources Board property, where there's a very innovative project of 48 units, which is Inquam qualified, and it's a very innovative project. So that's part of the deal. If you live close to town, you're going to have more density. I think that's a good thing, but how we deal with that density is another question, how best to do that. On the utility thing, I totally agree with Dave in terms of about controlling our destiny, but I don't think we turn it over to commissioners we don't even elect or that aren't even from the island. I mean, we talk about KPD taking over the system. As I understand the proposal as it is currently, it's a situation where the city would divest it to KPUD and pay KPD a couple $1 million. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I I am very firmly resolved that we need to control our own destiny as an island as best as possible. It doesn't mean that there may not be some future time when a more regional approach would work, but right now things are majorly in flux in terms of the water utility. I mean, what happened a few years ago in terms of the rates and how things were done, you know, things happened that should never have happened in terms of how that was structured and how it was managed. But look what's happened since then. We changed our form of government. We have a city manager form now with a different person who's just leading the administration of the city manager. We have different management staff, and look at what they've done. They've done some things that are real positive. They've worked to change the management of this utility, to reduce staff, and now they've reduced the rates 34%, and they're doing other things as well. So, you know, I'm looking toward the future. Mistakes were made in the past. Let's figure out. For me, it seems like it's an issue of management, and I think there's plenty of examples of utilities throughout the state that are even smaller than Bainbridge's utility, where they can offer rates that are very comparable. So I don't think it's the economies of scale issue that there's no way that Bainbridge can run a utility of that size and offer competitive rates. I don't think that's true. And I also I'm concerned about the water rights. I'm concerned about controlling what is more essential than water, especially looking 30, 50 years down the road. Nothing is. It's incredibly important. And I think we need to control that as best we possibly can. The city council does. We don't need to go to someplace else in Kitsap County to answer to somebody else about how to control that resource, unless we do so voluntarily through some intergovernmental organization. And what we're talking about here is divesting the utility to KPUD and probably losing the water rights, and also losing control of that utility. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think at the very least, let's give it a couple years. Let's let the new management and staff reductions, let's let that work. If it doesn't work, then I'm open to different ideas, but let's give it a chance to work.
In your work with other cities, I imagine that's what you're drawing on right now. Are there very many cities that run their own sewer utility but not their water utility? Do you see that very often?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's interesting though, because it's a good question about how they're tied together. I mean, you know, if you think about the water itself that runs the sewer utility, where's that water coming from? You know, there is this idea that we have these utilities that work in partnership, and there's cost efficiencies by having the same staff work on the stormwater and the sewer and the water. You know, there's definitely some economies of scale that make sense in that regard. But again, if it means through this process, through the changes that have been made a year from now, 2 years from now, that the city management can't get its act together and can't run it efficiently, I'm definitely open to some other ideas. But we need to consider these other bigger issues down the road about water rights and about managing that essential resource. Because, you know, for example, there's cities throughout the state. Roslyn is a good example where they lost water rights and had to go back and acquire those rights. And it can be, you know, that it's, again, what is more essential than water? We need to be very thoughtful about this and not just take a knee-jerk reaction and say the city made mistakes in the past. There's no way that, I'm hearing things about there's just no way the city can offer rates that are comparable. Well, apparently, you know, the way things have been set up, Dave may disagree, but what the consultant report's showing and other members of the UAC are saying is, if you look at the way that the rates have been structured, the city likely can offer very comparable rates. So if it's not about the rates and the money, what's it about? It's about giving up our control of this essential utility. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Do you have any fear of giving up control?
Yeah, let me respond to a couple of his points, if I may. First of all, on the water rights, we don't control the water rights. Water rights are controlled by the Department of Ecology, and the water rights are used for the benefit of the ratepayers. And the Department of Health approves the water plan that every utility in the state puts together to show how they're going to use the water from those water rights to benefit the people in their service area. Every utility around them gets to look at that plan, comment on it. If they've got any objections, those objections have to be addressed. Okay, so we've got ratepayers there that water has to be used for the benefit of. You know, I think if you back away from this whole issue, we've got a management group that has been doing a pretty poor job of running the utility for at least the last 10 years. And all of a sudden they're going to say, oh, we're going to do a wonderful job now, trust us. You know, tomorrow we'll clean up our act and we'll become very efficient managers, although we've never done that in the past. And the choice is somebody who's got a very, very good, not a good, but an excellent record of long-term management of a growing utility, not being KPUD. You know, somebody who's got a very solid track record and somebody who hopes to have a track record, which is a pretty bad one down the road. That's the choice. Did I answer your question?
You did, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's what I wanted to give you a chance to. The other thing that we've talked about with a lot of the candidates, and I know you guys have heard this at the forums, is this whole issue with the Civil Service Commission and some police oversight. I'm not going to ask your opinion on what the Civil Service Commission should or should not be doing, but there is kind of an issue, and it's not just recently, about trust in the police department up there. And so I'm curious about your opinion on what steps the city council should take as it begins 2012. What would you kind of push for as far as reaffirming some trust in the community and addressing some of those concerns?
Well, I think that one of my ideas in terms of, again, it's kind of a bigger issue, but relates to this, is that we need to have more of a sense for the community to be able to have a forum to talk and to communicate with the council. And it's different than coming to a public hearing where you just say what you want to say. So for example, I think we should have like a town hall type meeting on the police department. We should allow people to come and talk about what their concerns are, and the council should be there and listen to that and have a dialogue with people about that, because I think there are a lot of people in the community that do have concerns. And I've heard it from several people in the community. And in terms of specifics, I mean, I don't want to get into specifics, but it seems at the very least there's a sense of, again, this issue of partnership, and are we all, we're on this island together, we need to work together. What's the partnership there? The taxpayers are paying for this police department. Are they getting their money's worth, and they also are being treated fairly? And are their concerns being heard? And some of these issues can be pretty complicated, but I think at the end of the day, it needs to be a situation where people have a forum to talk directly to the council about these issues and vet those issues. And then the council needs to, if it hears things that can be improved, which I think there probably are some things that can be improved, then the council needs to set policies to make those improvements.
Do you think the council would be willing to, there's some things that people aren't going to say in public though.
Yeah.
There's, whoever knows what the expectations are, they're going to want to be quiet about this, things that need to be looked into, things that maybe do need some independent examination of.
Yeah.
Would you be part of a council that goes after those things, that looks for those things, that finds a way to get into the background, maybe investigate some of this stuff? Yeah,
and I'd be willing to be an ombudsman, and I think it's a very good issue, because in terms of, there are issues where it could be sensitive. And so at the very least, if there's that kind of town hall meeting where you have a discussion, a public discussion about this, it should be said right away that we understand there are some situations maybe people don't want to talk about in a public setting. And so at the very least, we were going to set up a forum or a way for you to communicate with the city manager or otherwise to talk about these issues. And also, if we have an ombudsman or two, a subcommittee of the council that takes that on as a number one, as a high priority to deal with hearing those concerns and then taking it to the council in terms of what improvements can be made. Then you not only have a conduit that people can have a way to express their concerns, but you also have some accountability on the council to deal with it. No subgroup of the council controls the council, obviously, but at least they'll have the concerns will have direct input onto the council itself, and it won't be a matter of only going through the city manager on these issues, which I think obviously one of the council's major jobs is to hire a very competent city manager, but there also needs to be on these policy perspective and setting those policies, the council needs to have direct input from the public about how best to set those policies and how we operate our police department is foremost in the community.
Well, I would agree with you that there is a concern about citizen trust for the police department. But I think the thing we can't forget is that there are many excellent, dedicated police officers, in our force. But from what I've seen, the problem appears to lie in the management and leadership of that department. And that's certainly solvable. The Civil Service Commission that you mentioned is not the be-all end-all to the solution, but I think it's very important that this body be independent, as it's supposed to be by state law, as I understand, because it plays a very important role in reviewing who gets hired by the police department, which means who gets to carry a badge and a gun on Bainbridge Island, what their qualifications are, how well trained they are. And there's been some fairly lax execution of that whole thing, and that's what's caused one of the causes of the current problem with the Civil Service Commission, and that needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. And then we do need a complete review of that department, and I totally support having a high level of citizen involvement in that to try to get to a point where we can have a more effectively run department and a more effectively led department, and we can rebuild trust with the community. It's pretty important. It's one of our major functions as a city, is to provide public safety, and a lot of people move to Bainbridge Island, not just because it's a beautiful place, which it is, because it also provides a very strong sense of security.
Is this something that's a priority enough to spend some money on bringing in an outside consultant or some sort of a panel next year?
I would say it's a priority. You know, the city's got a habit of, you know, every time there's a problem, you know, hiring a consultant, and that's got very mixed results. You mentioned the consultant for the water system. That was an absolute disaster. The quality of that report is very, very poor. There's many, many dedicated and qualified people on the island who are willing to volunteer. I would be in favor of starting off with a citizen committee to review the situation, and then, depending on what they came up with, maybe go to the next step and look for some outside professional help if that was appropriate.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. One of my former roles is working with a city and working with the city manager of that city to look at police performance and look at that particular position I worked. We focused on performance measures and focused on efficiencies within the contract model that was there. But we also looked at crime statistics, and we looked at how the community policing aspect and how the officers were relating to the public itself, the citizens. And so I think I'd agree that it's a matter of, first of all, assessing the situation by hearing from the public, from the citizens, about what they think the problems are. And then I think there's some definitely some talent on the council and also within the administration. So it'll be a matter of assessing that information and figuring out how, if it can be something that we can deal with ourselves, and if not, then maybe we do need some outside assistance in trying to strategize and figure out if we need some different policies or what needs to happen. Part of it gets challenging too is if you have situations like there are at Bainbridge, and which is not common, but there are several cities in the state that have the same situation where there are lawsuits brought against the police department. And so some of that, while a lawsuit is pending, it does put some limitation on the ability of especially some members of the city to be able to talk openly about the situation. But I don't think that's a huge barrier. I think there are ways to deal with that kind of information gathering so that the city can make informed decisions. And I think it's more than just about distrust and relationships. It's also about performance and trying to measure performance and figuring out performance measurements that we can determine whether we're getting a good bang for our buck for the size of department that we have as well. So it's more than just the interaction, but it's about the cost of the department itself and the services it provides. Maybe it's out there, but I haven't seen a good analysis of those issues in particular with respect to our department. Maybe it is the right size, maybe it's not. I think is what I've heard, it's pretty comparable to other departments of our size, but I think that's something we need to look at as well, just like with everything else in terms of our budget. It's part of the bigger picture.
Is the police department one of those things that should be considered for contracting out, say with the sheriff?
I don't think so.
Is that a question you'd ever want to ask?
I know there's some people in the community have talked about that. I think that's not a good idea. I think that's one of the reasons that we became an all-island city. As far as I understand, from those that have lived on the island for many, many decades, was one of the main issues was the response times were sometimes 20, 30 minutes. And so one of the main concerns was taking control over that essential service. And that's what we've done by having our own police department. Mm-hmm. And we already have this department. We already have the officers. We already have the cars. We already have the facility. So to unwind that, I don't think it's at this point advisable, and I don't think it's necessary. I think there's been some issues, but I think we can work through those issues, and I don't think contracting out again to the sheriff's department, some other third party that is much less accountable to the voters on Bainbridge Island, I don't think that's a good way to go.
No, as I mentioned, there's a lot of people on Bainbridge Island move there to get their sense of security, and it's nice to have our local police department. So I'm not in favor of looking at contracting out the whole operation to the county sheriff or anybody else. Now, that also doesn't preclude them cooperating with the county sheriff on certain items that may be of joint interest, where they could cooperate, there'd be an economic benefit, but the basic day-to-day patrol functions and policing functions and investigative functions, I think, need to remain on the island. We just need to focus on making them more accountable and more efficient and rebuilding the trust in that department. It's pretty important.
Got one more hypothetical for you. There's been a lot of talk about the roads, rebuilding roads, putting some more money into that. Is a car tab fee to pay for something like that? It's come up in Bremerton. They've considered sending that out to voters. Is that ever something you'd think about sending out to voters to ask that question?
Well, what's interesting is, if to the extent it could be offered where people make their own choice, they decide, so it's just a matter of the council saying, okay, we're going to put this out there, and if you want to tax yourselves to do this particular function, you can do that. In this situation, I'm not sure, with this particular tax, there's also some link to what the county is doing, so I'd have to look at that closer. But I would hope that, with the way that our budget, we went from being in the red to being in the black, we're going in the right direction. I think part of that also has to be this focus on capital improvements and especially on our road system. There's some projects, for example, I mentioned Wing Point Way, and there's others, Wyatt, there's others on the island, where they've been postponed for many years in a row, and so we need to figure out a way within the existing budget and to fund them. And if there's no way we can fund it, then that would be an option to say, okay, well, voters, we don't have, with our current budget and looking in a few years down the road, we're just not going to have, with the lack of real estate development otherwise, we're just not going to have enough tax money coming in. And if we need to do something more immediate on these to improve these roadways, then would you be willing to tax yourselves an additional amount of money and leave it to the voters to make that decision? But again, I need to confirm with the way that that tax works with the county that that's actually something that is turned over actually to the voters of Bainbridge solely to make that decision.
We talk about the road department. Right now, it's got a $2.8 million budget. 50% of that goes into overhead. Last year, they spent, I think, $692,000 on engineering, and actual pavement on the ground was $400,000. They did 4 miles of chip seal, and that's just horribly inefficient. And they're talking about having to sell bonds to do any major road improvements to all of 142 miles of road. But in the last 4 years, if you look at the personnel costs in the city versus the school district did a reasonably good job of controlling their personnel costs, that's salary and benefits, and they went up 9% in the last 4 years. The cities went up 24%. Now, if you take that 9% from the city, which is, I think, a pretty reasonable figure, and apply it, from the school district and apply it to the city's employees, you end up saving $1.5 million over that 4-year period of time. That $1.5 million would go a long way towards solving some of the road problems. The city itself has estimated that they need $1.3 million a year just to keep the roads at their current condition and prevent them from deteriorating anymore. So to say that out of one side of your mouth and say, okay, well, we're only going to put $400,000 into it, the roads are deteriorating. And I've done enough highway surveys in my technical career and been involved primarily in airports and runways, but there's some very well documented evidence that the longer you let the roadways or runways deteriorate, you reach a point where the cost of repairing them just goes up dramatically. We need to get on top of the maintenance of our road and start to get a systematic approach in towards repairing them and keeping them up and keeping the inventory of what the repairs and what the priorities are, and it's a very, very doable thing. This isn't rocket science. But no on the car tabs.
Sounds like there was another.
I was creeping up on that.
Yeah, no, I kind of read into what you're saying there. The 24% in personnel costs, is that including the layoffs that are now what the staffing level is heading into the next year.
No, this was just an analysis of the salary and benefits
Okay.
and how they changed over a 4-year period of
Okay.
time. So.
Anyone else with a question, guys? I've actually asked the questions I wanted to ask. So, well, let's wrap it up. We've been here the 45 minutes, and we'll give you each a chance to close. Again, 2 minutes, and Jim will say that if there's something we've missed that you wanted to bring up, this is your chance to do so. If there's a way to make a final statement, this is your chance to do so also. We'll let Joe go, and then David.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity again. I think the thing that I'd like to kind of focus on in closing is that this is a really unique time for government. We've gone through a sea change through our country in terms of our economy, and there's very challenging issues to deal with in terms of operating city government. And what I do in my job is I work with cities throughout the state in dealing with these kinds of issues. And so what it means is I get a lot of great ideas for how to do things that a lot of places think may not be possible. And I'd like to take that knowledge and experience and use that to assist our city in a very direct way, not just as a citizen giving input, but as a member of the city council. I also think I have the kind of temperament that can be very effective for a city council to keep things in perspective and in context. And I believe that our government's only as good as the people that we elect to be in our government and those that we hire to be in it as well. And I think there's some sense, and more broadly throughout this country at times, that government can't work. No matter what you do, it can't work. Well, I don't agree with that. And I think the people of Bainbridge don't believe that as a whole. I think that the people do have some issues with what's happened in the past, legitimate issues. But I think that we can do a lot better, and we're not going to do better unless the city council can come together and make good decisions about how to address these problems. And it means, one of the things I think a lot about is this partnership issue that I've been talking about, but also about why don't we be a model of excellence for customer service? There's a sense about trust with working with the community. Well, why don't we put a focus on, don't make it just some kind of idea. Let's have direct performance measurements, talk about customer service like Starbucks does and Nordstrom does and other places have direct experience with how to deal with people well and how to serve their needs and how to communicate with them and build that trust back up so people feel like their government, and not just feel like it, but know that their government is there to serve them. And I think that that comes from the city council, and it has been absent in the past to some extent, and I think I can be a big part of making that much, much better.
I've talked a lot about problems in the city, and that's only the first step. But it is an important step. You need to identify the problems. But each one of these problems that I mentioned has a very definable and easily executed solution that can lead to a much better situation. I really have a vision for moving towards a very efficient, well-run city that has a high level of customer service, and the sort of place when you go on vacation, you're bragging to the people that you run into on vacation by, well, we've got a really great city. We do a much better job than the guys you see around here. And that's we can't lose sight of that goal. And I don't want to get mired in the problems. Let's move past the problems into the solutions and into the vision for the future. I think that's it's very, very doable. And I've got a lot of experience in working with teams of people on very, very complex problems and engineering solutions for those. And it is eminently doable. And certainly something we can't afford not to do.
Thank you for coming in.